Division 6. This week we are finishing up fractions. So this video is going to show you a little mini lesson for each day of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And then you can go and use your workbook to do some practice about what the lesson was about. So for some of you it might be review, for some of you it might be new. I'm also going to attach some other YouTube videos of showing examples of teaching this part of fractions. If for some reason this is hard or you need to hear it in a different way, that usually helps me as well. So I'll link some other YouTube videos, but we're just gonna go through day by day. So there's gonna be 4 days this week. Friday's a Pro D. And so the first day we are focusing on reviewing equivalent fractions. So you'll be completing page 110 and 111 in your workbook. And we'll go over equivalent fractions for that. So an equivalent fraction is where we have two fractions and they actually represent the same amount, but they're using different numbers in their fractions. So I'm gonna give you an example of that. Since we're all at home, I have all the things at home to use as examples. So I decided I would find some socks. They're clean, you don't have to touch them anyways. And I have 2 pairs of socks here. 2 pairs of socks. So in this example, 1 pair is half of all of these socks. I have 1 pair, 2 pairs. This is half and this is half. It equals all of them together. But also, half of these socks can be shown as 2/4. So if I divide it into quarters, because I have 4 socks, 2 out of 4 of them, so 2/4 is the same as 1/2. 1/2 equals 2/4. So that's one example. Another example I have here is some eggs. And what I'll show you, actually, I'm missing one. I ate an egg, but that's okay. 6 eggs. So I'm just gonna flip it over here and show you. 6 eggs. Pretend that I have a full set of eggs. 6 out of 12, so half a dozen, 6 out of 12 is the same as 1/2. If I divide all of these into 2 groups, I'll get 6. 6 out of 12 plus 6 out of 12 equals 12 out of 12, but it also equals 1 whole, a whole dozen of eggs. So those are 2 examples. I'm also going to show you how to do number 1 on page 110 because that one is a little bit tricky. So I'm gonna put up a picture of that and I'll explain it to you while I'm showing you, or I'll explain it to you when the picture's up so that you can actually see how to do it. And then for the rest of the day, you will work on your examples using page 110 and 111. Here's what you see in your workbook. Number 1, there's 16 different squares and 4 of them are shaded. It's kind of hard to tell, so I actually made another picture that we're going to look at. But basically the easiest way to write a fraction for that is 4 out of 16. 4 are highlighted out of all 16 squares. So an equivalent fraction, you have the same amount represented. So this is actually a way, it just took away all the little squares. It still is exactly the same number, it's 1/4. 1 out of 4 is the same as 4 out of 16, which also you'll see is the same as 2 out of 8. Still the same amount is shaded, that hasn't changed. It's just how we chopped up the squares to represent the number. So in the last picture, what you'll see is that they all equal each other. So you can write down for that answer, 4 out of 16, the first box, is this an equivalent fraction to 1 out of 4 and is equivalent to 2 out of 8. So here are ways to do it. You could draw a picture like I did. You could also multiply the top and bottom number by the same thing. Or number 2, you could divide the top and bottom number by the same thing. So I'll just show you how I did that by putting up the pictures again. 4 and 16. If I divide both of those by 2, I will get 2/8. I hope that helps with your assignment. You can ask me any questions you have over Teams. Alrighty, day 2 for math this week. We are looking at fractions and mixed numbers. So you're going to be using page 112 and 113 in your notebook. And there's 3 different types of fractions that we're going to be talking about this week. So fractions, as you know, are usually less than 1 whole. When a fraction is less than 1 whole, it's called a proper fraction. So that's the normal kind of fraction where we have a smaller number on the top and a bigger number on the bottom. So the numerator is smaller than the denominator, always smaller in a proper fraction. But did you know that fractions can actually be bigger than 1 whole? For example, again, I'm in my kitchen. I'm going to use what I have here. I have a cutting board and a knife and 2 lines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut each one of these 2 lines in half. And I actually need to eat this one, so I'm going to set it aside. And what do I have left? Here, what I actually have left is 3 halves of a line. 1 half, 2 half, 3 half. You can see that 3 halves is bigger than a whole because I have the whole here when I put it together and 1 extra half. So one way of writing that is 3 halves, 3 on the top and 2 on the bottom. That is called an improper fraction. The numerator is bigger than the denominator. This means it's always going to be a number that's bigger than 1. So usually we think of our fractions as being less than 1. 1 half, for example, 1/2, that is a proper fraction. But when I have 3 halves and I put it together and I put 3 on the top and 2 on the bottom, that is 3 halves and it's an improper fraction. Now here's the tricky part. Improper fractions can be written 2 different ways. So we also have something that's called a mixed number. It's called a mixed number because it's a mix of a whole number and a fraction together. So instead of saying this is 3 halves, is there another way I could write that? I'm going to let you think about it for a minute. How can I mix a fraction and a whole number to represent this? What I can do is actually just write 1 1/2. And that is called a mixed fraction. So there's lots of different examples we can do with this. Today in page 112 and 113, we're going to be practicing the different ways of representing fractions using proper, improper, and mixed fractions. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to do question number 1 with you so you have an example, and then I'll let you do the rest of them on your own. And again, I'm going to link some YouTube videos so that if you need some more examples and demonstrations of what an improper, proper, and mixed fraction is, you can watch those YouTube videos as well. Let's take a look at number 1A on page 112. What it's asking us to do, it says write an improper fraction and a mixed number for each picture. So we know because there's more than 1 whole, it's going to be improper, and it can also be written as a mixed fraction. So first of all, let's see how many pieces our wholes are divided into. So in A, each whole is divided into 3. So it's divided into thirds. That tells me for my improper fraction, the number on the bottom is going to be 3 because it's divided into thirds. And now I can just count all of them up to see how many thirds I have. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 thirds. So 8 thirds is how I would write that as an improper fraction. It's also asking for a mixed fraction. So how many wholes do I have? I have 2 wholes, and then how many thirds do I have left? So I have 2 wholes and 2 thirds. So it would be 2 and 2 thirds. Why don't you try the rest on your own? Remember to start by counting how many pieces it's divided into. So just as a hint, B will be into quarters. And for today's work, you're going to be using your fraction strips. If you would like to use the one that I've put up here as a picture instead, that is definitely okay as well. For this one, I'm going to let you do it mostly on your own, because what you need to do is look at that fraction strip, add up the fractions so that you can compare it. So for example, if I were to ask you, what is bigger, 1/3 or 2/4? You would look at where the line for 1/3 ends, so right up in the line green, and then you would see that the line for where I have 2/4 is further along in my whole. So what that means is that 2/4 is bigger than 1/3. So for today's questions, that is one of the best ways to help us understand which fractions are bigger than each other. Please use this or the fraction strips that you've used, or maybe you had a leftover fraction strip page that I gave you when we were still in class, and you can use it to do all of your questions for the work today in your workbook.